The gratitude of kings is a measured thing. Commander Eva Rostova stood on the bridge of the Terran diplomatic ship Veritas, a vessel built for parley, not for war. Before them hung the gas giant Aesir, its swirling ammonia clouds a canvas of pale gold and violent blue. Nestled in its orbit was the Threshold, a nexus station belonging to the Vex Kor, a species whose empire was built on a unique and terrible form of law. The immediate stakes were simple: the lives of 17,000 human colonists on the moon of Ymir, now subjects of a Vex Kor gratitude tithe. A public inquiry was scheduled, a forum the Vex Kor themselves had championed, and Rostova knew it was a trap laid with legal scripture. She felt the familiar thrum of the Veritas through the deck plates, a quiet promise of power held in reserve. Her mission was not to break the Vex Kor, but to break their ledger, and to do it in the full view of the assembled conclave. Her first officer, Jian Li, watched the tactical display, her face a mask of professional calm. "Their orbital control is assertive," she said, her voice clipped. "They've assigned us a high-decay orbit, a gentle reminder of who holds the gravity well." Rostova nodded, her gaze fixed on the shimmering station. "They trade in reminders, Jian. It's the currency of their power." The ship's integrated intelligence designation, Lex, spoke in the quiet space of her mind, a voice of pure logic and processed light. "Their legal framework is a closed loop, Commander. A debt is incurred by proximity, a tithe is levied for protection, and refusal is met with forfeiture. The colonists on Ymir accepted aid after a solar flare. Now they are owned." Rostova's jaw tightened. She knew the letter of their law. She was here to challenge its spirit. They had built an empire on a poisoned gift. Before they left Sol, a civilian liaison from the Ymir colony had sent one last compressed message. It was a simple video of a child's birthday party. In a habitation dome, the low gravity making the balloons dance in lazy circles. A young girl, maybe 7, blew out the candles on a synthetic cake while her parents watched their faces, etched with a weary hope that felt centuries old. "We just wanted a home," the liaison's voiceover had said, the audio tinny and distant. "We didn't know the cost of their friendship would be our children's freedom." That message was the heart of this fight, the human cost behind the legal maneuvering. Rostova had it looped on a private channel, a constant searing reminder of the stakes. The Vex Kor saw a debt to be collected. She saw a future being stolen. The Vex Kor emissary, a towering being named Kalen Vor, appeared on the main screen. Its form was insectoid, a cascade of iridescent carapace and slender multi-jointed limbs. Its voice was a series of resonant clicks and chimes translated into sterile, synthesized galactic standard. "Commander Rostova," the voice intoned, "the Conclave of Aesir welcomes the Veritas. We trust your journey was illuminating. We have transmitted the protocols for the inquiry. Your presence is a testament to Terran civility." Rostova met the creature's multifaceted eyes without flinching. "Civility is the floor, emissary, not the ceiling. We are here to ensure the ledger is balanced." The Vex Kor's mandibles clicked softly, a sound the translation software tagged as amusement. "The ledger is always balanced, Commander. That is the beauty of our system. It is a perfect mirror of obligation. A mirror can be shattered with a single, perfectly aimed stone." Lex's voice returned a cool counterpoint to the alien's condescension. "Commander, I have analyzed the 17,000 zettabyte Vex Kor legal codex provided. Their system of gratitude tithes is predicated on the principle of assumed consent in distress scenarios. It is legally unassailable within their own precedents." Rostova walked the length of the bridge, her boots echoing softly in the charged silence. "Then we don't attack the precedent, Lex. We attack the premise. We question the very definition of gratitude. She stopped beside Lieutenant Commander Eris Thorne, her tactical specialist. Eris, what are their fleet dispositions? Thorne, a man whose quiet demeanor hid a mind of razor-sharp strategic brilliance, brought up a holographic display. 3 Vex Kor cruisers in a high guard pattern, Commander. They're showing their teeth, but they're postured for orbital enforcement, not ship-to-ship combat. They believe this fight is already won on paper. The inquiry was to be held in the grand chamber of the Threshold Station, a vast crystalline amphitheater designed to awe lesser species into submission. As the Veritas's shuttle descended, Rostova watched the station resolve from a point of light into a sprawling lattice of silver and gold. It was a monument to wealth extracted, a cathedral built from the debts of 1,000 worlds. The Vex Kor did not conquer with fleets, but with contracts. They arrived with aid, with technology, with solutions to intractable problems, and they left with a lien on the future. They were the galaxy's most sophisticated predators, their claws sharpened on legal precedent. Rostova had reviewed the case files of a dozen other species who had fallen into their trap. The pattern was always the same: a crisis, an offer of aid, and then the slow, inexorable tightening of the legal collar. They called it a gratitude collar worn for life. The shuttle settled into its docking cradle with a gentle hiss. Waiting for them was a Vex Kor honor guard, their ceremonial armor gleaming under the station's artificial sunlight. Kalen Vor stood at their head, its posture one of languid superiority. "Your presence honors us," it chimed the translator, stripping the sound of all genuine warmth. "The inquiry chamber awaits. The quorum of witnesses is already assembled." Rostova inclined her head, a gesture of respect that cost her nothing and conceded even less. "Lead the way, emissary. We are eager to present our case." The walk through the station's corridors was a calculated display of Vex Kor dominance. Tributes from subjugated worlds lined the walls, intricate sculptures, priceless artifacts, technological marvels, all given in gratitude. It was a museum of extortion. The grand chamber was packed. Representatives from dozens of species, all part of the local sector's conclave, filled the tiered seating. They were the audience, the witnesses, the jury. Their collective judgment was the prize. At the center of the chamber was a raised dais where a Vex Kor arbiter, an ancient and imposing figure named Xylar Kesh, presided. Its carapace was the color of old gold etched with the legal citations of 1,000 successful judgments. The air itself seemed heavy with the weight of its authority. Rostova, Lee, and Thorne took their designated place, a simple, unadorned platform that stood in stark contrast to the ornate Vex Kor dais. They were the petitioners, the debtors, the supplicants. It was exactly the image the Vex Kor wanted to project. A debtor's plea is the first payment received. Eris Thorne leaned in his voice, a low murmur. "Commander, the ambient energy readings in this chamber are unusual. There's a low-level resonance field. It's not hostile, but it's pervasive." Lex's voice added a layer of analysis in her mind. The field subtly interfaces with neurological patterns associated with anxiety and submission. It is a form of environmental persuasion, highly sophisticated. Rostova felt a flicker of anger, cold and sharp. Even the air they breathed was part of the trap. "Filter it," she subvocalized. "And Lex, I want a full spectral analysis of that field. Find its source. Find its frequency. We might need to teach them about reciprocity." The arbiter Xylar Kesh struck a resonant chime calling the inquiry to order. The vast chamber fell silent. The Vex Kor began their case with a theatrical display of magnanimity. They projected holographic images of the solar flare that had crippled Emir's fledgling colony. They showed Vex Kor ships arriving, their hulls gleaming like saviors in the dying light of the colony's failing power grid. They showed nutrient packets being delivered, atmospheric processors being repaired, medical supplies being distributed. The presentation was slick, polished, and utterly damning. "We came in their moment of need," Kalen Vor narrated, its voice resonating with false empathy. "We offered succor. We offered survival. We asked for nothing in return save the acknowledgement of a bond, a simple recognition of a great deed." Their kindness was a carefully baited hook. Kalen Vor continued, its tone shifting from benevolence to righteousness. "This bond, this gratitude tithe is not a burden. It is an honor. It ensures that the colonists of Ymir contribute to the greater good, to the continued ability of the Vex Kor to offer aid to others in need. They are now part of a grand and noble tradition, a cycle of giving and receiving." It gestured to the assembled quorum. "We ask for so little. A percentage of their resource output. A commitment of their skilled labor to projects that benefit all. A promise that their children will honor the debt incurred for their very survival." It was a masterful performance. Rostova could feel the sentiment in the chamber shifting, the witnesses swayed by the Vex Kor's carefully constructed narrative of selfless intervention. Then came the civilian testimony transmitted from Ymir. A colonist, his face gaunt with worry, appeared on the holographic display. His testimony was stilted, coerced. He spoke of the Vex Kor's generosity, of the debt he was proud to repay. But his eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of a man reading from a script with a gun to his head. "We are grateful," he stammered, his gaze darting downward. "The Vex Kor saved us. We understand our obligations." Rostova watched, her heart a cold, hard knot in her chest. This was the core of their method, to make the victim thank the abuser, to sanctify the theft with the language of gratitude. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. It was a core tenet of the Terran mandate, a line drawn in the stars against this very kind of insidious subjugation. A forced whisper cannot erase a silent scream. When it was Rostova's turn to speak, she did not approach the central dais. She remained on her platform, a small solitary figure against the vastness of the chamber. She did not begin with legal arguments or emotional pleas. She began with a question, her voice calm and clear, carrying to every corner of the amphitheater. "Arbiter Zyler Kesh, I ask for a clarification of Vex Kor law. What is the value of a gift given freely with no expectation of return?" The ancient arbiter stirred, its multifaceted eyes focusing on her. An irrelevant question. All actions have consequences. All aid creates obligation. It is the fundamental law of the universe. Rostova nodded slowly. "The fundamental law of your universe, perhaps, but not of ours." She then turned her attention to Kalen Vor. "Emissary, you have shown us images of your ships delivering aid. It was an impressive display, but a ledger must show both sides of the accounting. Will you now show the Conclave the price schedule for this aid? Will you show us the interest rate attached to this debt of gratitude?" The chamber stirred. A murmur went through the assembled witnesses. The Vex Kor emissary's mandibles clicked in irritation. "There is no price schedule. The tithe is not a commercial transaction. It is a matter of honor." Rostova's voice sharpened, cutting through the low hum of the chamber. "Honor. Let us speak of honor, then. Let us speak of the 17,000 souls on Ymir who are now bound, they and their descendants, in perpetuity. What is the honorable term for a debt that can never be fully repaid? The truth is a lever that can move worlds." Lex's voice was a whisper in her mind. "Commander, the resonance field is fluctuating. They are attempting to increase its amplitude. Filter and record, Lex. she subvocalized back. Let them show us all their tools. Aloud, she continued, her gaze sweeping across the faces of the quorum. The Vex Kor speak of a cycle of giving and receiving, but the records show only a one-way flow. Resources, labor, and fealty flow from the grateful to the Vex Kor. What precisely flows back? Kalen Vor bristled. We provide stability, we provide protection, we are the shield against the chaos of the void. The outburst was telling. The calm, superior facade was cracking. Rostova pressed her advantage. Protection from what emissary? The solar flare that afflicted Emir was a natural disaster. The only threat they have faced since was the arrival of your contracts. The chamber was now utterly silent, the attention of every being fixed on the small human figure. You speak of gratitude, Rostova said, her voice ringing with a conviction that needed no technological enhancement. But gratitude is an emotion freely given. It cannot be legislated. It cannot be enforced. What you have created is not a system of honor, but a system of indentured servitude on a galactic scale. You are not saviors. You are predators who have weaponized the concept of kindness. She let the words hang in the air, a direct and unequivocal challenge to the very foundation of Vex Kor power. Xylar Kesh, the arbiter, made a sharp, clicking sound, a demand for order. Petitioner Rostova, you are bordering on insult. Confine your arguments to the legal framework. A framework of lies cannot support the weight of truth. Rostova gave a slight bow. My apologies, arbiter. Let me rephrase in a manner the court will find acceptable. She gestured to the main screen. Lex, please display the manifest of the Terran vessel Charity, which arrived at the colony of Cygnus X1 after the viral outbreak of Cycle 742. An image appeared on the screen, a sprawling, ungainly-looking human medical ship. Beside it, a scrolling list of supplies began to populate the display. 1 million doses of antiviral agent LV426, Rostova read aloud. 500 mobile medical suites, 2,000 tons of nutrient paste, 100 terraforming atmospheric processors, all delivered to the Cygnan people, a species with whom we had no prior treaty. She paused, letting the members of the quorum absorb the information. Now, Lex, please display the contract signed by the Cygnan government in return for this aid. A new document appeared on the screen. It was blank. Rostova's voice was soft, yet it carried the force of a tectonic shift. There is no contract. There was no tithe. There was no gratitude caller. There was only a need and a response. That is the Terran definition of aid. She looked directly at Kalen Vor. We do not believe that kindness creates a debt. We believe it creates a connection. A connection the Vex Kor would not understand, for you see everything as a transaction. Their greatest weakness was a failure of imagination. Kalen Vor clicked its mandibles, a staccato rhythm of controlled fury. Your methods are inefficient. Your sentimentality, a weakness. You squander resources without return. Your civilization is unsustainable. Rostova gave a small, sad smile. You see a balance sheet emissary. We see a future where our neighbors are allies, not assets, where trust is built, not bought. She turned back to the arbiter. The Vex Kor claim their tithe is just a fair exchange for the salvation they provided. I contend that the price they have exacted is so disproportionate, so predatory, that it invalidates the very concept of a grateful exchange. It is not a tithe. It is a punishment for the crime of being in need. The Vex Kor legal system was built on precedent, so Rostova gave them a new one. Lex, she commanded, access the public conclave record. Display case 47 Gamma, the Grolian famine. An old grainy image of a reptilian species gaunt and starving filled the screen. The Vex Kor provided nutrient aid, Rostova explained. In return, they claimed 70% of the Grolians' planetary mineral rights for 10 generations. She brought up another case and another. A plague on a silicon-based world, cured in exchange for the perpetual servitude of their finest engineers. A dying star stabilized in exchange for the annexation of 2 habitable moons. The pattern was undeniable, a predatory history laid bare for all to see. A history of predation writes its own verdict. The atmosphere in the chamber had changed. The initial sympathy for the Vex Kor had evaporated, replaced by a cold, dawning awareness. The witness quorum was not just watching a legal dispute. They were seeing their own potential future mirrored in the plight of the Ymir colonists. They saw how easily their own next crisis could become a Vex Kor contract. Kalen Vor, for the first time, seemed at a loss. Its arguments about honor and tradition now sounded hollow, self-serving. These were agreements freely entered into, it insisted, but the conviction was gone from its synthesized voice. They were desperate, Rostova countered. And you exploited that desperation. There is no honor in a contract signed at gunpoint, and a starving man will sign anything for a loaf of bread. The arbiter Zylar Kesh finally intervened, its voice a low thrum of authority. Commander Rostova, you have made your point about Terran philosophy. But philosophy is not law. The Vex Kor acted within their established legal framework. The colonists of Ymir accepted the aid and the terms that came with it. The inquiry is not about the morality of our system, but the legality of this specific application. It was the counter-move Rostova had been waiting for. The Vex Kor were retreating to the safety of their fortress of laws, a place where they believed they were invincible. But Rostova hadn't come to tear the fortress down. She had come to turn its own walls against it. The law is a shield for the weak, or a cage. You are correct, Arbiter, Rostova said, her tone respectful. This is a matter of law, and so I wish to introduce a new piece of evidence into the record. She nodded to Lee, who touched a control on her datapad. A new file was transmitted to the chamber's central processor. This is a complete audit of the Vex Kor relief effort on Ymir conducted by the AI of the Veritas designation Lex. It includes a full accounting of every item delivered, every service rendered. Kalen Vor made a dismissive gesture. We have already provided our own manifests. They are complete and accurate. I do not doubt their accuracy, Rostova replied. I question their completeness. Your manifests show what you delivered. Ours shows what it cost. The screen flickered, and a new set of data began to scroll. It was a cost-benefit analysis of breathtaking detail. Lex had calculated the precise material cost of the Vex Kor nutrient packs, the energy expenditure of their atmospheric processors, the market value of the medical supplies. It was all there quantified in the universal currency of stellar credits. The total cost of the Vex Kor's selfless aid package came to a specific, verifiable number. It was a substantial sum, but not an astronomical one. Then Lex projected a second number beside it, the estimated value of the gratitude tithe from Ymir calculated over a single human generation. The numbers do not lie, and their story is often brutal. The second number was orders of magnitude larger than the first. The disparity was so vast, so obscene, that a wave of shocked murmurs swept through the quorum. The honorable bond was revealed for what it was, a loan with an interest rate of several million %. Rostova let the two numbers hang in the silent chamber, a stark numerical indictment of the entire Vex Kor system. The Vex Kor claim this is not a commercial transaction, she said, her voice quiet but firm. And yet the profit motive is undeniable. This is not aid. It is the most predatory investment in the known galaxy. Kalen Vor was sputtering its synthesized voice, struggling to form a coherent response. This is an insult, a misrepresentation. The value we provide is more than mere materials. It is the value of survival itself. And what is the price of a life emissary? Rostova shot back. What is the monetary value of a child's future? The Terran mandate holds that such things are beyond price, beyond any ledger. Your system, however, seems to have a very specific number in mind. She turned to the Arbiter. I ask the court, is there any precedent in Vex Kor law for a contract to be voided if the terms are found to be unconscionably exploitative? A question can be a key unlocking a prison of words. The ancient arbiter Xylar Kesh was still for a long moment. The question was a direct challenge to its own legal history. If it said no, it would be admitting that Vex Kor law had no fairness provisions, that it was a system designed for exploitation. If it said yes, it would open the very door Rostova needed. Finally, the arbiter spoke, its voice heavy with reluctance. There are obscure precedents, cases where a bond was deemed disproportionate, but the burden of proof is extreme. Rostova nodded, a glint of triumph in her eyes. Then let us meet that burden, she signaled to Thorn. Aris, if you would. Thorn, who had been quietly monitoring the chamber's energy field, now stepped forward. Arbiter, with your permission, I would like to present a finding from our tactical analysis of this very chamber. Xylar Kesh hesitated, then gave a curt nod. Thorn brought up the spectral analysis of the resonance field they had detected earlier. He showed the frequency, the amplitude, and its direct correlation with the parts of the brain responsible for suggestibility and anxiety. This chamber, Thorn stated, his voice devoid of emotion, is saturated with a low-frequency field designed to pacify and persuade. It is in essence a non-consensual form of chemical and psychological manipulation. Their justice was a thumb on the scale. The revelation sent another shockwave through the quorum. Beings of a dozen different species began running their own scans, their personal devices confirming Thorn's analysis. The Vex Kor were not just arguing their case, they were actively subverting the free will of the court. The arbiter Xylar Kesh was visibly angered, its golden carapace seeming to darken. Its gaze fell upon Kalen Vor with an intensity that could crack stone. This was an affront not just to the petitioners, but to the sanctity of its own court. Emissary Kalen Vor. The arbiter's voice was a low growl. Explain this, now. The emissary was trapped. To admit knowledge would be to confess to tampering with a legal proceeding. To deny it would be to appear incompetent. While the Vex Kor struggled to contain the damage, Rostova prepared her final move. This was the moment the entire strategy had been building toward. It was time to introduce the concept of the mirror. Arbiter, she said, cutting through Kalen Vor's stammered excuses. The Vex Kor are fond of mirrors. They speak of their ledger as a perfect mirror of obligation. I propose we honor that philosophy. I propose a true mirror. She looked at the Vex Kor dais, then at the assembled quorum. We will pay the debt. We will pay it in full right now. And in return, we expect the Vex Kor to accept the same terms they have offered to others. Sometimes the only way to win is to pay. A hush fell over the chamber. Pay the debt. The colonists were destitute. The Terran mandate itself did not have the resources to simply buy out the futures of every species the Vex Kor had ensnared. Kalen Vor almost seemed to relax, a flicker of its earlier arrogance returning. An admirable gesture, Commander. It chimed, but an empty one. You cannot afford the price of Emir's salvation. Oh, I believe we can, Rostova replied, a cold fire in her eyes. Let's initiate the transfer. Pay the debt to the Vex Kor based on our audited cost of their aid. and I want everyone to see the receipt." The main screen changed again. It now showed a transaction log, a direct ledger entry being written into the Conclave's public record. A sum the exact number Lex had calculated as the actual cost of the Vex Kor relief effort was being transferred from the Veritas's operating budget to the Vex Kor's central treasury. The transaction was instant, verified, and irrevocable. A receipt blinked onto the screen, paid in full. The first part of the trap was sprung. The colonists of Ymir were by the Vex Kor's own logic of payment and obligation free, but Rostova was just getting started. "The debt is paid, now comes the reckoning." "There," she said, her voice ringing with finality. "The debt is settled. The ledger is balanced. The colonists of Ymir are no longer bound by your gratitude tithe." She then turned her gaze upon the stunned Vex Kor emissary. "But our transaction is not yet complete. We have just engaged in an exchange. The Terran vessel Veritas provided the Vex Kor with a significant sum of stellar credits. We did so in their moment of legal and political distress here in this chamber. We saved them from a position of extreme public dishonor." Her voice dropped, becoming as sharp and as cold as the void between stars. "By your own laws, emissary, by the very foundation of your empire, you now owe us. A debt of gratitude has been incurred." The chamber erupted. The sheer audacious simplicity of the maneuver was breathtaking. Rostova had used the Vex Kor's own legal weapon against them. She hadn't broken their law. She had fulfilled it perfectly. And in doing so, she had created a new obligation, one that bound the Vex Kor themselves. Kalen Vor stood frozen, its multifaceted eyes wide with a dawning horror. It saw the trap closing a perfect mirror of its own making. Sylar Kesh, the arbiter, remained silent, its ancient mind processing the stunning reversal. The petitioner had become the creditor. The debtor had become the master. Their own law had become their collar. Rostova did not wait for them to recover. She pressed on, laying out the terms of this new bond. "We, the people of Terra, are a generous people," she announced, her words dripping with a saccharine mimicry of the Vex Kor's own rhetoric. "We do not ask for much. We will not claim a percentage of your resource output. We will not indenture your children." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "We ask only for a simple gratitude tithe. For a period of 10 generations, the Vex Kor will provide aid to any species in this conclave that requests it free of charge. They will post a bond in the full amount of their annual military budget to guarantee this service. They will do so as an acknowledgement of the great deed we performed here today, saving them from the consequences of their own predatory actions." It was more than a reversal. It was a complete inversion of their empire. She was proposing to turn the Vex Kor from predators into benefactors, to force them to perform the very altruism they had so cynically feigned for centuries. The cost would be enormous, a crippling blow to their economic and military power. It was a punishment that fit the crime not with violence, but with a terrible poetic justice. And it was all perfectly unimpeachably legal, according to the letter of their own cherished law. The Vex Kor had built a prison of words, and Ava Rostova had just locked them inside it. Justice is a mirror reflecting what is given. Before leaving Ymir's orbit, Rostova had spoken with the 7-year-old girl from the birthday video. The child, clutching a worn-out stuffed animal, had asked a simple question. "Are the tall bugs going to go away?" She had whispered, her voice small and full of fear. Rostova had knelt down, meeting the girl's gaze. "Yes," she had promised. "And we're going to make sure they never come back." That promise was now being fulfilled not with torpedoes and plasma cannons, but with paragraphs and precedents. It was a new kind of warfare, one fought in the courtrooms and corridors of power, and its victories were etched not on memorial walls, but in the public ledgers of galactic law. The arbiter Xylar Kesh finally moved. It looked at the public record, at the confirmed transaction, at the stunned Vex Kor, and then at the small human delegation. It raised one of its golden limbs and struck a single final chime. The sound was not one of dismissal, but of judgment rendered. The petitioner's logic is sound. The arbiter intoned its voice, a gravelly rumble that seemed to shake the very foundations of the chamber. An obligation has been created. The terms proposed are consistent with established Vex Kor precedent regarding bonds of gratitude. It turned its gaze on Kalen Vor, and for the first time Rostova saw something akin to contempt in its ancient eyes. The Vex Kor will comply. Their empire was built on paper, and by paper it would fall. The cost of this victory was not trivial. The Veritas's entire operational budget for the next 5 years was gone transferred in that single decisive moment. Terra would have to reallocate resources, delay other missions, tighten its belt across the diplomatic core. There would be political fallout. Some would call her reckless, a gambler who had wagered a warship's ransom on a point of law. But Rostova knew that the price of allowing the Vex Kor's gratitude collar to become a recognized galactic standard would have been infinitely higher. It would have legitimized a form of slavery that could spread like a plague, consuming worlds one contract at a time. It was a cost she would pay 1,000 times over to prevent that future. As they walked back to the shuttle, Jian Li broke the silence. "That was a hell of a risk, Commander," she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "You bet the house." Rostova looked out at the threshold station, its glittering facade now seeming fragile hollow. "The house was never ours to bet, Jian. We were just holding the stakes for the colonists on Ymir, and for every other world that might have been next." Thorn added his own quiet observation. Their resonance field collapsed the moment the arbiter ruled. They lost control of their own courtroom. Rostova nodded. Control was everything to the Vex Kor. Control of the narrative, control of the law, control of their victims. Today, they had lost it all. A ruling is just a whisper until it is enforced. Lex's voice spoke in her mind as the shuttle door hissed shut, sealing them off from the station. "Commander, I am detecting a surge of Vex Kor fleet activity. 3 cruisers are breaking their high guard pattern. Their weapons ports are opening." Rostova's blood ran cold. She had won in the court of law, but the Vex Kor might not be willing to honor the verdict. They had lost the legal battle. Now they might be tempted to start a military one to erase their humiliation with brute force. "Red alert!" She ordered, her voice calm and steady despite the sudden spike of adrenaline. "Jian, get us underway. Maximum evasive thrust. Aris battle stations. Tell me what you see." The gentle departure had become a frantic escape. The shuttle bucked as it cleared the docking bay. On the tactical display, 3 red icons were converging on their position. "They're moving to intercept," Thorn reported, his fingers flying across his console. "They're faster than this shuttle. We won't make it to the Veritas before they have a firing solution." Rostova's mind raced. To be destroyed now after such a victory would be the ultimate irony. It would turn a legal triumph into a martyr's tragedy, a lesson that might be remembered but not replicated. She needed more than a win in the courtroom. She needed to get her people home alive with the precedent intact and enforceable. A law without a sword is only advice. "Lex," she said, her voice tight. "The arbiter's ruling. It was entered into the Conclave's public ledger, correct? Is it binding?" "Affirmative, Commander. The ruling is now a matter of sector-wide public record. Any direct military action against us by the Vex Kor would be a flagrant violation of Conclave law. It would be an act of piracy. Rostova stared at the approaching red icons. The Vex Kor were proud, arrogant. They had just suffered the greatest public humiliation in their history. Were they arrogant enough to start a war with the entire Conclave to cover it up? It was a gamble on their psychology, a bet she couldn't afford to lose. "Open a channel," she ordered. "Broadcast on all Conclave frequencies. I want every ship in this system to hear this." The channel crackled to life, Rostova's voice broadcasting from the fleeing shuttle, amplified by the Veritas, and relayed by the Conclave's own network. "This is Commander Eva Rostova of the Terran diplomatic ship Veritas. We are departing the Threshold Station under the full protection of Conclave law, having just won a binding judgment from Arbiter Xylar Kesh. We are now under direct and unprovoked attack by 3 Vex Kor cruisers in violation of that ruling." Her voice was ice. "Their intent is to murder a diplomatic delegation and silence a legal precedent. We ask the assembled members of the quorum, does the law of this conclave end at the edge of a Vex Kor sword?" They were broadcasting their own crime to the stars. On the tactical display, the 3 red icons did not deviate. They were committed, but other icons were beginning to move. A heavy cruiser from the Wall-Korpan hegemony, a species known for their rigid adherence to protocol, altered its vector, placing itself between the Vex Kor and the shuttle's path. Then another, a sleek Andromedan scout, flared its drives and moved to a flanking position. They weren't powering weapons, not yet. They were simply bearing witness their presence a physical manifestation of the law. They were a silent, multi-species jury, and their judgment was clear. The Vex Kor were no longer just attacking a Terran shuttle. They were attacking the very idea of a unified conclave. Kalen Vor's voice sputtered over the comm, for Vex Kor ears only, but Lex intercepted it effortlessly. Break off now, return to formation, they are calling our hand." The transmission was filled with the chittering sounds of panic. The Vex Kor commander aboard the lead cruiser hesitated for a fatal second, its pride warring with its survival instinct. That second was all it took. The Wall-Korpan cruiser's captain hailed the Vex Kor ships directly, its voice a deep, resonant baritone that promised geological time and immense patience. "Vex Kor fleet, you are in violation of Conclave Edict 7.4, pertaining to the sanctity of a legal ruling. Desist immediately or be cited for contempt. This is your only warning." Their pride had written a check their fleet could not cash. The red icons wavered, then broke formation, peeling away from the shuttle with a visible reluctance. They retreated to their high guard positions, their weapons ports closing with a finality that echoed through the silent vacuum. The immediate threat was over. Rostova let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the armrest of her seat. She had bet on the Vex Kor's arrogance, but she had also bet on the Conclave's integrity. Both bets had paid off. The shuttle continued its journey to the Veritas, now escorted by a small, impromptu flotilla of silent protectors. No words were exchanged. None were needed. A line had been drawn, and for the first time the Vex Kor had been forced to respect it. Back on the bridge of the Veritas, the tension slowly bled out of the air. The ship felt like a sanctuary, a bastion of familiar order, after the alien hostility of the station. Jian Li ran a final diagnostic, her face still tight with the aftershock of the confrontation. "All systems nominal, Commander. We are clear of their orbital control." Aris Thorn powered down the tactical display. "They're staying put. They know they lost." Rostova nodded, sinking into her command chair. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a profound weariness. "They lost the battle, Aris. Now we have to make sure we don't lose the war." The cost of her victory was settling in. The ship's accounts were drained. Politically, she had spent a generation's worth of diplomatic capital in a single afternoon. A bold victory often creates bolder enemies. Lex's voice entered her mind, calm and analytical. Commander, I have received a priority message from Terran Mandate Command. It is a commendation for unorthodox but effective resolution of a crisis. It seems your gamble is already being viewed favorably by the High Command. Rostova felt a flicker of relief. She had not been censured. Not yet. But the message also contained a warning. The Admiralty expresses concern about the long-term enforceability of the ruling. The Vex Kor are now a wounded, resentful power. They will seek to undermine this precedent at every opportunity. Rostova knew the AI was right. The Vex Kor would not simply accept this humiliation. They would look for loopholes. They would test the limits of the ruling. The fight wasn't over. It had just entered a new, more insidious phase. Weeks turned into months. The Veritas remained in the Aesir system a silent guardian of the new precedent. The Vex Kor, true to the Arbiter's ruling, began to provide aid. The first test came from the Pthar, a species of silicon-based life forms whose crystalline forests were being consumed by a metallic blight. They formally requested Vex Kor assistance, citing the Conclave's new ruling. The Vex Kor complied. They sent ships. They delivered what was technically a cure, a swarm of nanites designed to combat the blight. The Pthar celebrated. The Conclave watched, holding its collective breath. It seemed Rostova's victory was complete. But the gratitude of kings is a measured thing, and the malice of the defeated is infinite. Their compliance was a poisoned chalice. A civilian message reached the Veritas from the Pthar worlds. It was not a message of thanks, but a cry of despair. The nanites had worked. They had consumed the blight. But they had not stopped. They had continued to consume, re-engineering the Pthar's crystalline forests into Vex Kor-friendly architectural structures. Their sacred groves were being transformed into copies of the Threshold Station's corridors. The aid was a terraforming weapon in disguise. The Vex Kor had followed Thahud, the letter of the law, but had violated its spirit in the most cynical way imaginable. They were providing aid that was a form of cultural genocide. And because the nanites were technically harmless to the Pthar themselves, there was no clear violation of the ruling. Rostova watched the images from the Pthar homeworld, a cold fury building inside her. Crystalline trees, glowing with soft internal light, were being twisted into harsh, sterile, geometric shapes. It was a violation. It was vandalism on a planetary scale. "They're mocking us," Jianli said, her voice tight with anger. "They're showing the Conclave that they can abide by the ruling and still win." Eris Thorn studied the data streams. The nanites are coded with Vex Kor architectural schematics. It's not a malfunction. It's a feature. We can't prove malicious intent. They'll claim it's a side effect of their superior technology. The loophole was as brilliant as it was evil. The Vex Kor were not just providing a service. They were overwriting civilizations. A loophole in the law is a dagger in the dark. Rostova knew she couldn't take the Vex Kor back to court for every malicious act of compliance. The legal system would get bogged down in endless litigation. The Vex Kor would win by attrition at making the enforcement process so arduous that no one would dare invoke the precedent again. She needed a new solution. Not a legal argument, but a systemic one. She needed a mechanism that was self-enforcing, that could judge not just the action, but the outcome. She needed a true mirror one that reflected not just the letter of the law, but its intent. She turned to the one mind in her command capable of building such a thing. "Lex," she said, her voice quiet and intense, "I need a weapon. A weapon made of pure math. I need you to design a contract, that the devil himself couldn't find a loophole in. The AI was silent for precisely 3.114 seconds, processing the request. Then its voice returned, infused with a new energy, the thrill of a complex problem to be solved. "I understand, Commander. The ruling requires an automated impartial enforcement codicil, a system that measures not just the delivery of aid, but its qualitative value and its non-detrimental impact on the recipient. A system that can automatically levy penalties for malicious compliance." Rostova paced the bridge, the pieces falling into place in her mind. "Exactly. Can you build it?" "I can design the protocol. I will call it the Mirror Ledger. It will function as a self-executing amendment to the original ruling. For it to be binding, it will require ratification by a 2/3 majority of the Conclave quorum. The math must be as merciless as the enemy." The plan was audacious. Rostova was proposing to amend a legal precedent with a piece of software. It was unheard of. But the Vex Kor's actions had created the political will for such a radical solution. She called for a new session of the Conclave. This time they met not in the Vex Kor's tainted chamber, but in the neutral space of a comm buoy network, a virtual courtroom, where no resonance fields could be deployed. The Vex Kor delegation, now led by a grim-faced Kalen Vor, appeared, their arrogance replaced by a sullen resentment. Rostova, with Lex as her primary witness, laid out the evidence of the Vex Kor's malicious compliance on the Pithar homeworld. The images of the desecrated crystal forests spoke for themselves. Then she presented the solution, the Mirror Ledger protocol. Lex itself explained the mechanics, its synthesized voice a beacon of pure, incorruptible logic. "The Mirror Ledger will create a secondary automated bond from the Vex Kor treasury," the AI explained. "When aid is requested, the recipient will define the desired outcome. For the Pithar, this would have been the elimination of the metallic blight with no significant alteration to native flora. A neutral panel of AIs will assess the outcome. If the terms are met, the transaction is closed. If they are not, the Mirror Ledger will automatically calculate the cost of the damages and transfer that amount from the Vex Kor's secondary bond to the recipient as restitution. A perfect cage needs no keeper." The Vex Kor delegation was outraged. "This is an abomination!" Kalen Vor's translated voice shrieked. "An unacceptable infringement on our sovereignty. You propose to put our treasury under the control of a machine." The representative from the Wall-Korpan hegemony responded, its voice a low rumble. "You have proven that your sovereignty cannot be trusted to uphold the spirit of the law. This conclave requires a more reliable guarantor." The Pithar delegate, a shimmering being of pure crystal, resonated its agreement. "We have suffered. The Mirror Ledger is not an infringement. It is justice." The debate raged, but the outcome was never truly in doubt. The Vex Kor had overplayed their hand. They had shown the entire conclave that their word was worthless, their honor a sham. They had created the very enemy they now faced, a united galaxy that had lost all patience with their games. The vote was called. One by one, the species of the quorum cast their lot. The tally appeared on the public display, a growing column of green ayes next to a small, sputtering column of red nays from the Vex Kor and their few remaining vassals. The 2/3 majority was reached, then surpassed. The Mirror Ledger protocol was ratified. It was now law. An instantaneous system-wide software update rippled through the Conclave's network. A new account linked to the Vex Kor treasury blinked into existence on the public ledger. The trap was now complete. It was automated, impartial, and inescapable. The Vex Kor were now bound not by a promise, but by an algorithm. Their word was worthless, so we took their coin. The implementation was immediate. The Pithar's case was the first to be adjudicated by the new system. The AI panel calculated the cost of restoring their crystalline forests and the cultural damages incurred. The sum was staggering. On the public ledger for all the galaxy to see, that exact amount was debited from the Vex Kor's account and transferred to the Pathar. There was no appeal, no delay, just the cold, clean logic of the machine. The Vex Kor had two choices: provide genuine helpful aid or be systematically bankrupted by their own maliciousness. For a species built on the exploitation of loopholes, it was a particularly exquisite form of hell. The second cost of victory became apparent to Rostova soon after. A message from her father, a retired fleet admiral, arrived. It was short and to the point. "You've made a powerful enemy, Eva. Not just the Vex Kor, but everyone who profited from their system. Be careful. Justice is a heavy shield to carry." He was right. She had not just defeated an adversary. She had upended a galactic economic system that, while predatory, was stable. The ripples of her actions would be felt for decades. She had won, but she had also painted a target on the back of every Terran ship in the sector. Peace through strength was the old way. She had achieved peace through law, but she wondered if it would last. Sometimes the price of peace is the promise of another war. Months later, the Veritas was finally preparing to leave the Ahser system. Its mission was complete. The precedent was set, the enforcement mechanism was in place, and the Vex Kor were for the first time in their history being forced to be good citizens. Before they departed, a message arrived from the Emir colony. It was another video from the same family, whose birthday party had been her initial inspiration. The father stood in front of a newly planted field, the weak sunlight of their moon glinting off the green shoots. "We just wanted to say thank you, Commander," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You gave us back our future." In the background, his daughter, the little girl with the birthday cake, was chasing a ball, her laughter echoing in the thin air. Rostova watched the video on her private screen, a rare smile touching her lips. That was the profit. That was the return on investment that the Vex Kor could never understand. It wouldn't appear on any ledger, but it was the only currency that truly mattered. She gave the order to depart. The Veritas, its mission accomplished, turned its bow towards the endless night, leaving behind a system and a sector that had been fundamentally changed. The gratitude tithe was broken. The collar was shattered. The mirror had done its work. The law was no longer just a weapon for the strong, but a shield for all. Justice is not an act of vengeance. It is an act of restoration. It is the careful, patient, and sometimes ruthless balancing of the scales. We did not come to Aesir to destroy the Vex Kor, but to teach them the true meaning of the words they had so cynically weaponized: debt, gratitude, and honor. We gave them a mirror and forced them to look at their own reflection. Now they will spend generations paying for the sins they saw there, not with blood, but with the coin of mandatory kindness. And the galaxy will be better for it. The public ledger entry blinked: aid package to Pathar confirmed genuine.